The new CEO of Xbox used to run Instacart. Let that satisfying little piece of information settle into your brain for a second because it gets so much worse from there. Microsoft just removed Phil Spencer, a man who spent 38 years at the company and over a decade leading Xbox, and replaced him with a 36-year-old AI executive who's been at Microsoft for 2 years, hasn't shipped a game, hasn't run a gaming company, and whose most notable previous accomplishment was helping people get their groceries delivered faster. And I need to talk about it because what's actually happening here is way bigger and way dumber than most people realize. So here's what went down. On Friday, February 20th, 2026, Microsoft dropped what might be the most consequential leadership shakeup in Xbox history, and they did it the way corporations always do these things, with a blog post on a Friday when they're hoping nobody's paying attention. Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox for 12 years, announced his retirement. Sarah Bond, the president of Xbox, who led their subscription and multi-platform strategy, is leaving the company entirely. Matt Booty, who'd been co-leading alongside Bond, got promoted to Chief Content Officer, which is basically Microsoft's way of saying please stay because we need at least one person in the building who knows what a video game is. And stepping into the CEO role for all of Xbox is Asha Sharma, who was previously running product development in Microsoft's core AI division, their artificial intelligence business. Now, Spencer's blog post said this had been planned over the past year, and maybe that's true, but a whole lot of people in the industry aren't buying that for a second. The much more believable reading is that Spencer and Bond were asked to leave and that Nadella handpicked Sharma specifically to accelerate Xbox's adoption of AI across every aspect of the business. And if that's the case, and I think it probably is, then what we're looking at isn't just a leadership change, it's Microsoft telling the entire gaming industry exactly where their priorities are. And spoiler alert, it's not making great games. Before I get into the disaster that's unfolding, I want to talk about Phil Spencer for a minute because I think it's important to understand what Xbox is actually losing here. Michael Pachter, the legendary analyst at Wedbush who's been covering this industry for decades, put it about as clearly as anyone could when he said Spencer was, and I'm quoting directly, the most gamer-friendly CEO of a console business ever. He really believed in the experience. He believed in indie games. The accessibility drive was really important to Phil. That was his thing. Phil was authentic. And that word, authentic, matters more in gaming than almost any other industry because gamers can smell corporate nonsense from a mile away, and Spencer somehow managed to lead a division inside one of the largest corporations on Earth while still feeling like one of us. The guy played games for hundreds of hours, not as some carefully staged PR photo op, but because he genuinely loved them. He looked at Tim Schafer over at Double Fine making a game called Keeper, where you literally play as a walking lighthouse, and instead of saying, how does this fit into our strategic content pipeline, he said that Schafer was an inspiration for other Xbox studios to be more creative and innovative. He championed ID at Xbox, the independent game program, because he believed indie developers made the entire ecosystem better for everyone. He pushed the accessibility initiative harder than any console executive in history because he believed every person should be able to play regardless of their abilities. He wanted to do more television shows like Fallout, which is apparently heading to a third season, because he saw it as a way to bring non-gamers into these franchises. Was he perfect? Absolutely not, and I'll get to that. But the man cared, and in an industry that's increasingly run by people who view games as content units and players as engagement metrics, having someone at the top who genuinely gave a damn was worth more than people realized. Don McGowan, who was the legal head for Xbox, said something that stuck with me. He pointed out that Spencer had the vision to see that Microsoft's best move with Bungie was to spin them off so they'd stay focused on Halo 3 instead of getting bogged down in internal fights. That's not just business instinct, that's someone who understood game development culture well enough to know when to get out of the way. And now he's gone, and the person replacing him used to run Instacart. So predictably, the internet completely lost its mind over this, and honestly the reactions range from genuinely insightful to absolutely unhinged. Jeff Grubb over at Giant Bomb posted what might be the most efficient piece of games journalism I've ever seen. 4 words, lol, it's over. That's it. That's the analysis. And honestly, hard to argue with the man. On the more ridiculous end of the spectrum, some people accused Satya Nadella of committing Indian nepotism because both he and Sharma are of Indian descent, which is about as intellectually serious as accusing every white CEO of nepotism every time they promote another white executive. So we're going to leave that one exactly where it belongs and move on to the people who actually had something worth listening to. Chris Heatherly, a longtime gaming veteran, didn't hold back even a little bit when he said, and I love how direct this is, it's a disaster and anyone saying otherwise is being dishonest. We're talking about the greatest collection of game studios ever in one place. Activision, Blizzard, Halo, Bethesda, Minecraft, and they still lost the console war. And the games suck. And then Rami Ismail, who's one of the most thoughtful voices in the indie game space, posted something on Blue Sky that I think captures the complicated reality of this whole situation better than anyone else managed to. He said Spencer has messed up plenty of things, and that he's not a martyr or a hero, but then added something that genuinely hit me. I just think he really did try his best, and I'm worried we're about to see the alternative. And honestly, that worry, I share it completely. So let's actually look at who Asha Sharma is, because dismissing her without understanding her background would be lazy, and I'm trying to be at least somewhat fair before I explain why I think this is a terrible decision. She's 36 years old. She was COO of Instacart, which is a legitimate operational leadership role at a major company. Before that, she held big positions at Meta. And for the past 2 years, she's been running product development at Microsoft's core AI business, which is the division building the foundational AI technology that Nadella's betting Microsoft's entire future on. So she's not a nobody. She's clearly someone Nadella trusts and sees as a rising star within Microsoft's corporate structure. But here's the thing that nobody who defends this appointment seems to want to address directly. As Pachter pointed out, nobody in gaming knew who she was before she got named to run Xbox. Nobody. 0 people in this industry had her on their radar, and that's not because gaming is some insular club that refuses to accept outsiders. It's because she has literally no connection to this world whatsoever. And the gaming industry has a very specific and very well-documented history of chewing up and spitting out tech executives who think they can walk in and figure it out. Tadej Kelly, who's been consulting in this space for years, explained the pattern perfectly when he said that taking on leading a gaming platform from a standing start is like deliberately choosing to light yourself on fire. Because tech people bring a bunch of tech industry thinking with them, which usually translates to feature talk centered around products and reasons to burn engineering dollars. And almost always, the gamers don't give a damn about any of it. And then Kelly dropped what I think might be the single most important insight in this entire conversation. He said that running a games business is basically like running a music label, that it only happens to look like a tech business, but it's actually comics. You thought you were in the satisfaction business, but actually you're selling carnival tickets. That is the thing Microsoft has never understood about Xbox, and putting an AI executive in charge tells me they still don't. But the most devastating take came from Seamus Blackley, who's one of the actual co-creators of the original Xbox, a founding father of this entire platform. And he compared Sharma's role to that of a palliative care doctor. For anyone who doesn't know, a palliative care doctor doesn't treat your illness, they don't try to cure you. A palliative care doctor keeps you comfortable while you die. Blackley genuinely believes that Nadella's massive investment in AI means Xbox, as we know it, is being sunset, and that Sharma's there to manage that transition as gently as possible. Now, to be completely honest, the reason Microsoft felt the need to make a change isn't entirely unfair, because the reality is that Xbox has been struggling badly for a while, and the numbers don't lie. Xbox Series X and S have been outsold by Sony's PlayStation 5 by around 50 million units, which isn't a close race by any possible interpretation. The $68.7 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard, the most expensive acquisition in gaming history, hasn't paid off in any obvious way, and worse, it led to massive layoffs that made Microsoft look like they bought one of the most iconic gaming companies in history just to gut it. That's probably the single biggest black mark on Spencer's entire record, and it's a legitimate one. And then there's Game Pass, which was supposed to be Xbox's master strategy. The thing that would take them from competing for 400 million console households to potentially reaching 1 billion players through cloud streaming and subscriptions, it didn't work, and Pachter explained exactly why in a way that I think is genuinely brilliant. He said the problem with Game Pass was that it was all or nothing. Give me $30 a month or screw you, you aren't playing my games. And then he made this comparison that I can't stop thinking about. Who's going to pay for a buffet knowing it's 5 times the cost of a meal? Because that's exactly what happened. Microsoft increased the price for Game Pass Ultimate to $30 a month, reportedly because Call of Duty was losing revenue after being put into the subscription, and at that point the math just doesn't work for most people when a single game costs $70 and you're being asked to pay $360 a year. Pachter thinks they should have run it like a cafeteria, an a la carte strategy like Steam, or bundle it with something like Netflix, but not at $30 a month. And honestly, that seems so obviously correct that you have to wonder how an entire division full of smart people missed it. Sarah Bond led a lot of that subscription strategy, and her record on it was mixed at best. The subscriptions didn't expand the market the way they were supposed to, and the pricing increases after the Activision acquisition felt like an admission that the model wasn't working as planned. As for the future of Xbox hardware, Pachter said something pretty bleak. I think the console is dead. I think they've already blown it with the console by embracing Game Pass. And, on top of that, rising component costs like memory chips, which have apparently gone up 90% this quarter because of AI demand, might make new consoles unaffordable anyway. So yeah, Xbox was struggling, Spencer and Bond didn't fix it, and a change was probably necessary. But this change, that's where I have a serious problem. Okay, so everything I've told you so far is the story that everyone's telling. Phil's gone, Sharma's in, Xbox is in trouble, gamers are mad. But I came across something while researching this that genuinely reframes the entire situation. And even though I disagree with where it leads, I think it's important to understand because it's probably the actual logic behind why Nadella made this move. Rosen Sharma, and no relation to Asha by the way, is the founder of BlueStacks and Now.gg, both major companies in the gaming space. And after this news broke, he posted an analysis that is honestly the most fascinating thing I've read about this whole situation. He opened with a line that stopped me cold. I think this has very little to do with gaming. And then he laid out a thesis that, whether you agree with it or not, is genuinely kind of mind-blowing when you think it through. Right now, across the entire field of artificial intelligence, the biggest minds in the world, people like Fei-Fei Li at World Labs, Yann LeCun at Meta, Demis Hassabis at Google DeepMind, are all converging on the same next frontier, which is something called world models. These aren't chatbots or image generators. These are AI systems that understand physical environments, physics, spatial relationships, and how humans behave inside three-dimensional spaces. The thesis is that future AI for things like robotics and autonomous vehicles needs to learn from watching how humans actually act inside complex environments. And Rosen Sharma's point is devastatingly simple. Where do millions of humans act inside detailed physics-based three-dimensional worlds every single day? Video games. Every time someone plays Forza Horizon, they're making thousands of decisions inside a high-fidelity physics simulation. Every Minecraft player is making spatial reasoning decisions. Every Halo player is making tactical choices in three-dimensional space. And Microsoft can capture all of that data, structured, labeled, time-stamped, with full 3D geometry and complete physics simulation. And this isn't just theoretical speculation either, because Microsoft Research already built something called Project Muse, a world and human action model that was trained on years of Xbox gameplay data, combining visual information with controller inputs to learn how environments respond to human decisions. They've also filed a patent for real-time 3D sensor alignment that points directly towards spatial intelligence applications way beyond gaming. Rosen Sharma's conclusion was that Xbox isn't really a gaming business anymore. It's what he called a large-scale human behavior simulation platform that creates a long-term data moat. And viewed through that lens, Asha Sharma isn't a weird choice at all. She's the logical one for where Microsoft's AI ambitions are heading next. And I'll be real with you, as a piece of strategic analysis that's genuinely impressive. I sat with it for a while, and I can absolutely see why someone like Satya Nadella would read that kind of thinking and get excited about it. But here's my problem with it, and it's the same problem I have with basically everything Microsoft's done with Xbox for the past decade. This is the same pattern every single time. Microsoft looks at Xbox, and instead of seeing a gaming platform that needs great games, they see a Trojan horse for whatever their current corporate obsession happens to be. With Xbox One, it was the entertainment box fantasy. Kelly actually pointed this out. He said Microsoft completely screwed themselves on Xbox One by getting ludicrously bewitched by entertainment box fantasies. Then it was cloud streaming and the idea that hardware wouldn't matter anymore. Then it was Game Pass, and the subscription for everyone strategy that Pachter just explained was fundamentally broken from day one. And now it's AI and world models and behavioral data platforms and spatial intelligence patents. Meanwhile, what's Sony doing? What's Nintendo doing? They're making games, good ones, and they're winning. Asha Sharma said all the right things in her introductory statement. She talked about the return of Xbox and committed to not flooding the ecosystem with soulless AI slop, and said games will always be art, crafted by humans and created with the most innovative technology provided by us. And if she actually follows through on that, great. Genuinely, I would love nothing more than to be wrong about this. But Blackley's concern is exactly right. Can she actually walk that talk? because the entire reason she was hired is her AI background, and Nadella didn't put an AI executive in charge of Xbox because he wants her to ignore AI and just focus on making good games. That's not how corporations work, and anyone who thinks otherwise is being naive. Daniel Bain, a former producer at ZeniMax Studios, raised an interesting counterpoint that I want to address because it's worth thinking about. He suggested that maybe Nadella's moving Sharma from core AI to Xbox because AI isn't going to be profitable anytime soon and gaming is still a massive revenue generator. Meaning maybe AI needs Xbox more than Xbox needs AI. That's a clever read, but even if it's true, it still means Xbox is being treated as a funding mechanism for Microsoft's AI ambitions rather than as a gaming platform that exists for gamers. Pachter said something that I keep coming back to. He said, "You're not putting her in there to fire everybody. If you're Satya Nadella, you're putting her in there to learn that business." So it actually tells me they believe in the business. They just didn't believe in it the way it was being run. And I want to believe that. But believing in the business and believing in gaming are two very different things, and Microsoft's got a 20-year track record of confusing the two. At least Pachter pointed out that Sharma was smart enough to keep Matt Booty in a senior role as Chief Content Officer, which means there's at least one person with deep gaming experience between her and the thousands of developers at studios like Bethesda and Blizzard and all the rest. Pachter called Booty essential for continuity, and I think that might be the understatement of the year because without him, this whole thing would feel even more like Microsoft handing the keys to someone who's never driven the car. Corey Rosemond, a former Google Games executive, raised one more possibility that I find genuinely intriguing. He said he could see a world where Sharma's actual job is to spin Xbox out from Microsoft entirely, and noted there's $100 billion available out in the world for something like that. And honestly, that might be the most exciting outcome of all of this, because Xbox has always been tied, some say anchored, to the rest of Microsoft, forced to serve corporate priorities instead of just being a gaming company. An independent Xbox, that's something I could actually get excited about, but I'm not holding my breath. Look, I've been pretty harsh in this video, and I stand by everything I've said, but I want to end on something real because I think this situation deserves at least that much. Rami Ismail said something about Phil Spencer that I haven't been able to get out of my head since I read it. He said, "For all the criticism Phil Spencer got for leading one of the biggest ships in games, sometimes deserved, sometimes less so, I think he brought two immutable qualities we might all miss in the upcoming Xbox. He never shied from admitting a mistake, and he genuinely gave a shit." He genuinely gave a shit. In an industry where executives are increasingly interchangeable corporate operators who could just as easily be running a beverage company or a logistics platform, Phil Spencer actually cared about games and cared about the people who play them and cared about the people who make them. He wasn't perfect. The Activision acquisition aftermath and the Game Pass pricing mess are legitimate failures that affected real people's lives and careers. But he cared, and that mattered more than I think anyone fully appreciated until right now, when it's gone. And that's the thing that worries me most about what comes next. Not the AI integration, not the corporate strategy, not even the question of whether Xbox hardware survives. What worries me is whether anyone in that building still cares about this stuff the way Spencer did, or whether Xbox just became another line item on Microsoft's AI roadmap. I think Xbox is cooked. I think this is Microsoft doing what Microsoft always does, chasing a corporate fantasy instead of doing the obvious thing that everyone in gaming has been screaming at them to do for years, which is just make great games. Chris Heatherly literally said it, just cut all the strategic distractions and synergy projects and just make great games. That's it. That's always been the answer. But gaming genuinely needs competition, and a world where Sony just runs unopposed isn't good for any of us. So I would honestly love to be wrong about this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm putting my take on the record right now, February 2026, and I'm coming back to this video in 2 years to find out who actually called it right. Tell me in the comments. Am I wrong? Does anyone out there see a path where Asha Sharma actually turns Xbox around? Because I'm reading every single response and I genuinely want to know if I'm missing something.